like to call the meeting to order. Would you please call the roll?
Mayor Jorgensen.
Present.
Commissioner Wygand.
Present.
Commissioner Kaler. Commissioner Crowley.
Present.
Commissioner Skidmore.
Present.
Well, good morning. Today is Wednesday, December 18th. The time is 9:30, and it's time for a regularly scheduled morning City Commission meeting. We'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance, followed by the invocation by Pastor Todd Miller with Cherry Street Wesleyan Church.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Well, as usual, it is an honor to be amongst you all, the leaders of this awesome city. Thank you for asking me to be here to pray this invocation. And I'm reminded of this Christmas, beautiful Christmas season where God came to earth to be with us, Emmanuel, God with us. And so that's what we'll do right now. Let's pray to invite that guiding Holy Spirit to be with this meeting, to guide you all. So bow with me. Heavenly Father, I thank you so much for this beautiful, beautiful season. The reason for this season, you coming to earth to be with us. We don't take that lightly. We thank you so much for that. We thank you so much for inviting us to be with you in ministry all over the world. But right now we ask you to sit amongst us, mold us, and guide us. Use us to guide this beautiful city in a way that helps it to flourish, but also in a way that brings you honor and you praise and you glory. God, we love you. It's in Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you.
Thank you, Pastor. That'll leave us on to the consent agenda, which includes item 6, which is minutes from December 2nd, 2019 study session, December 4th, 2019 regular meeting, December 9th, 2019 study session, and the December 9th, 2019 special call meeting. It also includes applications for cereal malt beverage licenses for the year 2020, and which has been reviewed by the police department and the city attorney with no reasons for denial. And we have 4 renewals for consumption on premises and 16 applications for not for consumption on premises, including 1 new one, which is the Dollar General store at 2212 South Princeton. At this time, I would accept a motion for acceptance of the consent agenda.
Mr. Mayor, I'll make that motion.
I'll second it.
It's been moved and seconded as such. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, let's proceed to vote. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries. That moves us on to the regular agenda. Are there any public comments this morning?
No one's registered.
Okay, we'll dispense with reading of the paragraph for public comments and move on to item 10, which is a declaration. At this time, I'd like to give the commissioners a chance to declare any conflict or communication that they've had that might influence their ability to consider today's issues impartially.
Mr. Mayor,
Commissioner.
item 14 does directly affect my business, but I believe the way I vote will kind of make an understanding of the way I will vote will kind of, I'll go along with, I guess, any other fees that everybody else would have to pay at that point. So I feel like I'm taking on the same thing that all the other contractors would with that. So.
Okay. All right, thank you. And I as well am a licensed contractor, residential contractor within the city. However, I do not feel like that would affect the way to consider today's issue impartially. Let's move on to new business, item 11.
Introduction of new employee.
Looks like a new police department, or is it? Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Commissioners. I'd like to introduce you to the newest police officer for the City of Ottawa, Kevin Verostek. Kevin started with us Monday and will begin his training within our department and hopefully very soon find out when he can attend the State Academy out in Yoder, Kansas, just outside of Hutchinson. Kevin is a 2010 graduate of Wellsville High School. He lives in Franklin County, a rural Wellsville address, and his family moved here from California as ranchers in California and was a cattle rancher in Wellsville for many years. We're looking forward to having Kevin start with us. Certainly it's going to be an addition to our staff, and I would just like to thank you all for your support for the police department in providing the services that we have and the support we need to have to hire great employees, and especially to Richard, the city manager, for his support through this process. And we couldn't do all of the hiring we've been doing and will continue to do without the help of the Human Resources Department with Michelle Stegman and her staff. So it's a gigantic team effort every time we bring a police officer on, and we'll continue to do that. So with that, I just want to bring Kevin over and introduce him to you and welcome him to our community and our department.
Well, thank you, Chief, and
Thank you.
welcome aboard, Kevin.
Thank you.
You bet. Let's move on to item 12.
Request for 2020 funding agreements.
Approval of funding agreements with the Ottawa Main Street, the Elizabeth Layton Center, Prairie Paws Animal Shelter, and Franklin County Development Council. We have our city manager, Richard Neinstead, to discuss this item.
Commissioners, these are our four major funding partners. We actually have some other funding partners, but these are the majority of what we allocate, of what you allocate your community dollars to. You've had a lot of discussion about the Ottawa Main Street Association funding agreement for 2020. The Elizabeth Layton Center funding agreement is basically the same for 2020 as 2019. I believe Prairie Paws is basically the same, and Franklin County Development Council is the same. And perhaps for the public's benefit, we ought to talk about what these organizations do for us. You make an investment in Ottawa Main Street Association because a strong downtown is a priority for this commission and this community, and these dollars help with those programs and with the director in the downtown area so that you can have a vibrant downtown. And I can tell you that when I came here 12 years ago, the downtown was not as full as what it is now, and that's because of the work of a lot of people. That's because of the work of your funding. In large part, that is the work of the retailers downtown that every day get up and try and do what they can to not only get business for their particular business, but also make it a strong, attractive downtown for our citizens and regionally for people to shop in, with the help of the Ottawa Main Street Association. Elizabeth Layton, we allocate a small sum, I believe it's $4,000 to Elizabeth Layton. They do a lot of work with Adam's department, with the police department, when it comes to dealing with situations that with our citizens and others that that involve mental health issues. So it's one way that we can recognize that and we can help improve the mental health issues that we have in our community. Prairie Paws Animal Shelter, you don't have a particular animal control. The city doesn't do that, but both the city and the county allocate money to Prairie Paws to help with the animal population, and I can tell you that Melissa, as you well know, does a great job and has made great strides in how Prairie Paws operates. And Franklin County Development Council, they, along with the Chamber, although we do not allocate directly to the Chamber of Commerce, Franklin County Development Council is our lead agency in addressing prospects and interest in trying to interest businesses that come to the table, locate. Their prime responsibility right now is Proximity Park. So that kind of gives everybody a little summary of what you are allocating public dollars for to those agencies. And there are, excuse me, Mayor, by the way, you're not Mr. Wygan, so why don't you, Mr. Wygan, switch with your name tonight, Senator.
Are we?
Well,
dang.
Just a little attention to detail, Commissioners. We don't want anybody to be confused.
Yeah.
So, there are representatives of these agencies here, in case you have any questions of them, but I would recommend to you that you approve these agreements.
Okay. Thank you, Richard. Do we have any questions or comments on this item?
Well, I feel it's important that we do support, as Richard had said, that we do partially fund some of those, all of those partially, and they do great work in the community and just seem like they get better at what they do every year. So I'm very supportive of that. If you're ready for a motion, I'll make it.
Okay. I guess that's a motion. Do we have a second?
A second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the funding agreements as represented in item 12. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, let's proceed to vote.
How do you vote, Commissioner Skidmore?
Yes.
Commissioner Weigand?
Yes.
Commissioner Kaler?
Yes.
Commissioner Crowley?
Yes.
Mayor Jorgensen?
And I vote yes, motion carries. Let's move to item 13.
Request to terminate Don Woodward Community Center lease between the City of Ottawa and the Ottawa Recreation Commission.
Due to damage from flooding this year, the Ottawa Recreation Commission has asked that their lease of the center be terminated. And we have our city manager to speak on this item.
So as we talked about on Monday, flooding's occurred. We've been a long-time partner with ORC at Don Woodward, and they have, in essence, figured out how to make it work, moving most of their programs over to the new, not so new now, but to the other ORC building. And their main concern was the flooding, and were it not for that flooding twice in 1 year, we likely would not be here. So just as a technicality, as the city attorney explained Monday, in essence, they did give verbal notice to us that they wouldn't be using that probably about September. So they have written a letter asking for that lease to be vacated or terminated, and I would recommend that you do so. And as we talked about Monday, one of the options that city staff is exploring is the Parks Department is actually taking a look at that facility and trying to determine if that could be a new home for the Parks Department. And along with that, we are going to do some work with stormwater down there and actually gather some information to see if we can increase the storage capacity down there, which not only would help the flooding on that building, but hopefully it might help the flooding in some of the other houses that it gets into also.
Okay. Do we have any questions or comments for Richard or on this item?
I think for the public's information, it's my understanding that this is economically neutral. It won't increase the cities, and it's actually long-term beneficial financially for us to look at it as a parks building. We've been paying for most of the insurance and maintenance and that kind of thing anyway, so it won't impact us negatively budget-wise.
And that's a good point, Commissioner Wygan. And the other thing that people ought to understand, if they look at where the park department is now, those are really not, well, they need a different facility that works better for them and works better for the public.
Okay. And we call this a lease, but there really wasn't any compensation that changed hands on it. So
Basically, they took care of minor maintenance. We took care of the major things. They paid the utility bills, and it was much kind of a working partnership.
okay. All right, thank you. Any other questions or comments? Do I hear a motion?
Mr. Mayor,
Commissioner.
I move that we terminate the lease with the Don Woodward Center between the Ottawa Recreation Commission and the City of Ottawa.
I'll second that.
It's been moved and seconded as such. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, let's proceed to vote.
How do you vote, Commissioner Crowley?
Yes.
Commissioner Skidmore?
Yes.
Commissioner Weigand?
Yes.
Commissioner Kaler?
Yes.
Mayor Jorgensen?
And I vote yes as well. Motion carries. Let's move to item 14.
Request for approval of ordinance revising contractor licensing fees.
An ordinance for licensing and fee procedures for general contractors, electricians, plumbers, and HVAC mechanics. This ordinance also repeals ordinance 4014-19, Chapter 6, Article 8 of the Municipal Code, and will be replaced in its entirety. And we have our two employees, Wendy Lee and Terry Elmer, to discuss this item.
Good morning, Commissioners. We've spent some time this year working on this ordinance, as you know. That's primarily our permit technician, Melanie Lamar, administrative assistant Charlotte Newkirk, and Terry Elmer, our chief building official. And we've brought it to you for consideration and discussion now several times to really fully flesh out what the changes are. The significant or the most broad change really has to do with, instead of licensing just individuals, we're going to work from a perspective of licensing the company, and then there are individuals within that. But there's some other changes. So Terry's more than happy to cover a little bit more of that if you'd like.
Right. And we've gone through quite a bit looking at the other jurisdictions around us to compile these numbers and how best to change these and modify these revisions to the ordinance. So that's how we've kind of established, you know, as far as going through and coming up with new numbers, new way of doing this, to make it as a business licensing instead of an individual licensing that better reflects on the business that they are licensed instead of solely upon an individual, you know, employee for the business. So I know we've gone through quite a bit of stuff to do this amendment for this ordinance. So we were just requesting that you take consideration to approve for the ordinance. I think it's going to help us out in the whole all with the city, working with the businesses to move forward and trying to bring everybody up to a little more current standards. A lot of jurisdictions are doing it this way as opposed to what we were previously doing it as individual licensing.
Okay. Do we have any questions or comments on this item?
One of the things that I've been thinking about since we first started discussing this whole licensing fee is that we haven't discussed continuing education at all. And what I mean by that is you guys have recently started, putting on free continuing education, where I carry a Johnson County license strictly for the continuing education that they offer, but it's a significant fee in order for that. Where you guys offer this continuing education, which suffices what is required for this renewal to happen anyway. So there may be a bump in this fee, but there's also things that go along with it that are beneficial for, these contractors too.
We actually didn't offer any training this year, but we are planning. In fact, Melanie's spoken with someone that might do it next year. But we have in the past, and that's not typical. But we know for some of our contractors, just trying to get to a place. We've had people now that have traveled out of state, primarily because maybe for them they're interested in something really in-depth that we wouldn't do in their field. But we do try to offer some sort of a training during the year. We're pretty generous with what we allow for their training. And in some cases, they don't get back information that helps them, and then Terry and Melanie have to go through. So we do try to give them pretty good customer service around that. But just this year, with some of the pressures on expenses and revenue, we didn't offer it. But we've either offered it free or it's certainly at a lower rate, to try and be good partners with our local contractors.
Okay.
I just want to make a comment, too. We may be only spending 10 minutes on this topic today, but there's been many, many hours of work, I know, in your department, Wendy, so thank you for that. I see Charlotte back there, all the work you guys did, all your whole department did. And also, I appreciate the fact that you took input from peers. You got input from all the people that are affected by this fee structure to be included in this assessment and decide what to do. Plus, it's been, I think it's 8 years since we've looked at this. I think it's important all of our departments be looking at fee structure and more often than we used to, and so that's important too. So I appreciate all the work on that, what you've done. With that, I'll make a motion we approve item number 14.
I'll second it.
You said 14?
Is that it? Yeah.
Item 14. Okay, it's been moved and seconded as such. Is there any discussion?
Mike did a good job of making my remarks, so I will just stay silent. You did a great job there.
Okay.
I'd like to add in again to what Commissioner Skidmore had said. There had been a little bit of chatter about this from contractors and from individuals that were concerned about this particular line item. What I might want to say is that it's really important that if you have a concern, not just to voice it on social media, but call one of us. I don't want to speak for all of us, but I know for myself, my phone is always ready to take your call or an email. So if you'll let us know that you have concerns about it, we certainly want to answer those questions. We can't always answer those questions if they're just posted in random places. So please get a hold of us and let us know. And I appreciate those contractors who did reach out to me and say, hey, I've got a concern about this, or hey, I've got a question about this. It does matter, and your voice really does matter.
Okay. Any further discussion? Hearing none, let's proceed to vote.
How do you vote, Commissioner Kaler?
Yes.
Commissioner Crowley?
Yes.
Commissioner Skidmore?
Yes.
Commissioner Wygand?
Yes.
Mayor Jorgensen?
And I vote yes, motion carries. Let's move on to item 15.
Request for approval of resolution defining and declaring the territorial limits and boundaries of the City of Ottawa.
This resolution defines and declares the territorial limits and boundaries of the City of Ottawa, including land that was annexed during 2019. And we have our Planning Director, Wendy Lee, to discuss this item.
Per the statutes, really, we are required to do this, pass this resolution whenever we've annexed. In 2019, we annexed 5 properties. There were 3 down near Proximity Park, south of Kingman, and one of those was just east of Proximity Park as well. Then there was one out on West 7th Street, and then one out on East Logan. The total number of acres, by the way, is 220.9. 2 of those parcels, which were owned by a family, a single family, were fairly significant in size. And that was something that they requested per their negotiations with us as we continue to look at developing in that really southern area south of I-35. And so this is just you could consider it annual, except for that, for example, last year we didn't have any annexation, so we didn't do it then. Happy to answer any questions.
Any questions or comments for Wendy?
Mr. Mayor.
Commissioner?
I move that we approve the motion to redefine and declare the territorial limits of the City of Ottawa.
I'll second that.
It's been moved and seconded as such. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, let's proceed to vote.
How do you vote, Commissioner Wygand?
Yes.
Commissioner Kaler?
Yes.
Commissioner Crowley?
Yes.
Commissioner Skidmore?
Yes.
Mayor Jorgensen?
And I vote yes, motion carries. Let's move on to item 16.
Request for approval of resolution defining regular meeting times of the governing body.
This resolution changes the time of the city's commission's regular meeting on the 3rd Wednesday of each month to 10 o'clock a.m.
So
And we
as-
have our city manager to discuss
As
this.
Mayor Jurgensen said, thank you for switching those nameplates on. So as Mayor Jurgensen said, this only affects your Wednesday morning meeting, going from 9:30 to 10 o'clock.
Is there any questions or comments on this item?
I just might mention that the city manager's sweater, that's quite a sweater you're wearing, by the way. You do realize we're voting on your contract later, don't you? We'll try to ignore what we see here, but
It does a lot of things.
multi-talented, you are.
That's right.
Okay.
Okay, is there, do I hear a motion?
Mr. Mayor,
Commissioner?
I'll make the motion to approve item 16 on the agenda.
I'll second it.
It's been moved and seconded as such. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, let's proceed to vote.
How do you vote, Commissioner Skidmore?
Yes.
Commissioner Wygand?
Yes.
Commissioner Kaler? Commissioner Crowley?
Yes.
Mayor Jorgensen?
And I vote yes, motion carries. Let's move on to item 17.
Approval of city manager employment agreement.
City Attorney Blaine Finch will present the current employment agreement for the city manager for consideration and approval.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Commissioners. I did not
try to go sweater for sweater with the city manager this morning. I decided to go ahead and keep it a little more subdued and let him shine and have the moment. What many in the public may not know is that every October, the commission begins a process of evaluating the city manager. Each of you complete individual evaluations, and we meet a couple of times to talk about your evaluations and your findings and to evaluate the city manager's performance for the year. Many of the things that come to light when we have these conversations are the positive traits that Richard brings to the job. He has a statewide respect and recognition for the work that he does. This year he was honored for 40 years of public service in various communities across the state of Kansas. He is the winner of the Buford Watson Award, which is kind of the Heisman Trophy of city management in the state of Kansas on a past occasion. And he is widely regarded as one of the best in the business across the state. Richard is ethical, and he is transparent, and he has a heart of service for the people in the city of Ottawa. Oftentimes when a citizen comes in complaining or has an issue or needs something, it's Richard who's the first to say, okay, wait a minute, let's take a look at this from that person's perspective. Let's put aside a rigid adherence to the rules for a second and say, what does this situation really need to help this person feel that they've been heard and that we've addressed the issue that they're facing. And I can tell you in my 20 years experience in local government, that is a unique perspective for many executives to take. It comes from a heart of service, and it comes from a desire to make the city not just work, but work for the people that we are here to serve. This year, you've faced challenges in the city. You've had flooding that's taken place and natural disasters. You've had questions surrounding the utilities funds and had to make a difficult decision about increasing rates so that you could balance the long-term stability and viability of the city's utilities against the citizens' desire to have ever-increasing levels of quality of service in that area. And we face challenges in the city's budget, including a restatement concerning city reserves. I think Richard would be one of the people who would tell you the test is not whether or not you face challenges in life, but it's how you recover from them. And it was him who had the experience and the steady hand to identify and discover problems, to bring them to you, not just as problems, but to implement immediate fixes, to stabilize the situation, and then to monitor those solutions to make sure that we were seeing continuous improvement throughout the year. And we are in a better position today than we were when the year started, and will continue to be through next year. The contract that is presented to you this morning, or employment agreement, as Richard likes to call it, features a one-year extension through October of 2022. It makes no change to the city manager's compensation, and that is at his request. He is adamant that as part of the belt tightening in response to the challenges that the city has faced, he should take the lead, and he has asked for no increase in his compensation. And I think that's very important, as he has fought for other employees to receive cost of living adjustments, not taken even that in terms of adjusting his pay, because he believes that leadership is about sacrifice and service. And so those are the two changes that you see in the agreement before you: the extension of 1 year, keeping compensation the same, and allowing Richard to adjust his retirement savings, his deferred compensation as part of that, as legal rules limit the ability that he can place in deferred compensation for this year versus last year. So with that, Commissioners, I will stand for questions. I think I've tried to accurately state the findings of your review this year and the reasons behind the draft that you have asked me to make and present to you this morning, and I'll stand for your questions.
Questions for the city manager? City attorney, excuse me.
I would just say that I would agree with everything you read. The only concern, I think Richard has high integrity, very ethical, very open, very knowledgeable, and has won numerous awards. I only question his choice of sweaters at some time, and perhaps that is not a big influence on the way the city operates, but
I think we could add an
echo what
addendum
you're
about
saying.
that, Commissioner. If you'd like me to do a little drafting on the fly, we can add a sweater
Okay.
addendum.
No
And
blinky
ties.
sweaters?
It's okay. He's got
And
enough
ties,
positive
questionable
points.
ties.
Yeah, that's very fashion choices.
Yeah.
I'll work with HR. We want to make sure we craft something that's legal.
Okay, do I hear a motion?
Mr. Mayor,
Commissioner?
I move that we approve the city manager's employment agreement.
I'll second.
It's been moved by Commissioner Kaler, seconded by Commissioner Crowley. Is there any discussion?
I'll just add that it's a pleasure to serve with you, Richard. I wish we could extend this contract out even farther than that, but this is okay for now, I suppose. But I feel that this is the only city commissioner I've ever worked on, the only city manager I've ever worked with, and so I can say, yeah, he's the best one I've ever had and worked with. But nonetheless, I have looked around. I've visited other commissioners around the state, and others have issues that we do not have here. And I think a lot of it's attributable to Richard's effort and his ownership of this city, the way he has been. Although he wasn't born here, we've adopted him here. He's our guy, and I really appreciate your commitment to this community.
Additional discussion?
I'd like to piggyback on what Commissioner Skidmore had said. I sit on a statewide board that has several city managers across the state that sit with me on that board, and oftentimes they ask about Richard almost every time, and ask how Richard's doing, what Richard's doing, but what would Richard do? And they often say that they call him for advice and look to him for leadership, and so I appreciate your leadership not only here in the city but statewide, so thank you.
And I would like to add that if the questionable sweaters and ties are the only thing we need to worry about, that we're pretty lucky.
Additional comments? Hearing none, let's proceed to vote.
How do you vote, Commissioner Crowley?
Yes.
Commissioner Skidmore?
Yes.
Commissioner Wygand?
Yes.
Commissioner Kaler?
Yes.
Mayor Jorgensen?
And I vote yes, motion carries. Now, let's move on to item 18, which is a report by city manager.
So I am always humbled by your confidence and support in me. I appreciate what you do for this community, and the successes that we have are because of our outstanding employees and citizens that are committed to this community. Every employee comes to work every day and puts in a hard day, hard nights, sometimes very long hours, making sure this city is ran in the best way possible. And I have great admiration for every one of those employees and deep respect for the job they do, because without them, your job and my job would be a lot harder, and this community would not be the progressive community that it is. So I can't say enough about our citizens and our employees. My wife and I were honored to be hired here. Blake was part of that original panel. And I think about that commission team that brought me in. And I just appreciate that they were willing to say, we want you to be our manager, because it was an easy answer to that. And this has been an excellent community to serve in. There are a great many things that are happening here, and so thank you very much, and thank you to our citizens. And I'll take your remark. Actually, my wife picked out this sweater, so she's going.
Well, then it's not so ugly then.
Comments and probably be upset. And she picked out the tie too, because my other tie that I have worn for years here just quit singing.
Doggone it.
So I want to wish our citizens and our employees and everybody a happy holiday season. Merry Christmas and Happy New Year.
Well, if I could echo your remarks, I think we have the best staff in the state of Kansas with our employees for our city. And also, if I can, during my first term as mayor, we hired Richard, and I may have done something right once. So I definitely did. So I appreciate the job that you've done through the years, Richard. Well, let's move on to reports by city commissioners. We'll start on my left with Commissioner Skidmore.
Well, I just want to wish everybody Merry Christmas, too. And remember, this is the season about giving, not receiving. I've been reading different reports about people paying for people's meals around town. leaving an extra large tip maybe for the waitress or waiter, and then checking in maybe in on your neighbors or that are shut-ins or alone. And it really truly means a lot more to give than to receive. So I just encourage everybody in our community to get out and do that this week.
Commissioner Weigand?
And I just want to wish everyone also a Merry Christmas and a safe travels if they are. And we wind this year up in good condition. So Merry Christmas to everybody.
Merry Christmas. Commissioner Kaler?
On a lighter note, despite the attack on our city manager's attire today, I believe, Mayor Jorgensen, wasn't it just a couple of years ago that you wore a full Christmas suit?
I did,
Okay,
yeah,
just
yeah.
making sure. I
Yeah.
just wanted to make sure I didn't, okay, so.
We have pictures.
just so- Yeah, that was good. Glad you didn't wear it today. It would have seemed a little odd, but
Okay.
anyway, no, happy holidays to everybody. Merry Christmas.
Okay. Commissioner Crowley?
Just want to say Merry Christmas and Happy New Year to everybody. Be safe.
Okay, that moves us on to report by mayor. And just real briefly, as we come to the end of the year, this is our last official city commission meeting of 2019, which is also the last official commission meeting of the decade of the 20 teens. And as we move into the 20s, we have a fresh start on a new decade, and I'm pretty excited about the city of Ottawa and the future of our community. One of the things that happens with the turn of the decade is that we move into a new census period, and coming up on April 1st will be a time when that we'll be counting the population within our community, Franklin County, Ottawa, and so forth. And some people may ask why we take the effort to do so. And it's written in our U.S. Constitution that we'll take a decennial census and count the number of people within our community. And we just had an election, and 3 of our commissioners will be taking an oath of office, which includes swearing to uphold the U.S. Constitution. And I've done it. I'm serving my 5th term as a city commissioner, and plus I've been mayor 4 times and mayor pro tem twice. And each time I raised my right hand and swore to uphold the Constitution. And so that's an important thing for us to support the counting of our people. And not only is it a count that we can say, okay, Ottawa has grown by 300 people or whatever, but there's also a financial aspect to the count, because if you just consider roughly that Franklin County has 25,000 people, if we're off on the count by just 1% within Franklin County, that's 250 people that didn't get counted in one county. And in one county in Kansas that has, 104 counties? Is that right? 105, okay. I guess I didn't count our own county. But it's 105 counties. But 250 people. And a lot of our federal funding within the local level is allocated based on funding and based on the number of people in our community. And that amounts to about $2,000 per person. So if you take if we're short by 250 people times $2,000, that's $500,000 in 1 year that it means that federal money that's not properly allocated towards our county. If you take that 500,000 times 10 years until our next census, that's $5 million that would not come to our community. So there is a large financial aspect of it, and we need to determine the people within our community. And that's a lot more difficult than what it may sound. If you have a college student that's staying on somebody's couch and moving around to friends, where's that person counted? If you have of course, you hear about homeless people living under the bridge. That's not the definition of homeless, the whole definition of homeless at this time. It's those people that are moving from couch to couch, or that may be living at someplace else, where's that person counted? And so we have a committee that's made up of city and county people that is dedicated to get an accurate count in our community. And we've been meeting for the past couple months, a few times, and you're going to hear more from this committee coming out in the near weeks. And so if you would like to get involved in that and be included in the count where everybody counts, then by all means call somebody within the city and we'll get you involved in that. So that's just kind of a rollout, and more to come later. And we have the city manager.
And Mayor, just as in addition to what you said, there have been advertisements in the paper and they're on Facebook. If you're looking for a part-time job that lasts throughout the census season, so to speak, there are jobs available for people to do local census work. So all they have to do is go to where they have to go to make that application.
And this will be the first year that it's a computer-based reporting. There's 10 questions on the census. It's not going to take anybody a long time to fill it out. You can fill it out on the computer, or they even have a telephone number that you can call and complete the questions. And you'll be getting postcards in the mail with a code on it to identify where you live. So, is there anything else to come before this meeting? The last item is to talk about announcements. On December 23rd, we'll have a study session at our normal time at 4 p.m. On December 25th, and on the city offices will be closed, and our study session at 4 p.m. on December 30th has been canceled. At this time, if there's no further items to come before our meeting, we'll consider it adjourned. Thank you.